I had no energy left in my body. I was just drained. So the right emotional tissue was offline, and all I had was this blissful euphoria of the present moment of, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm not dead. Now, I wasn't a complete human at that point, technically, because 3/4 of my brain was completely offline and not working, but I did not die that day. And so I got to make some decisions about, well, do I care? Do I try or do I not try? I mean, that's what life really boiled down to. Do I try or do I not try? And I was 37 at the time of the hemorrhage. I was in good physical condition. I could have been in this, what people would call a vegetative condition, for decades. And it was like, well, I either try or I don't try it. And I thought to myself, when I'm gone from this space, when I am dead, I get to experience this blissful euphoria probably all the time. It's what I become.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here today. I have one of my true heroes. For the interview today, I am so excited. And what I said before I came on is, I never get nervous. I'm nervous. This is how exciting it is for me. Before we get started, if you're enjoying this content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if the world feels a little overwhelming, but you do want to keep in touch, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. The link is in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, we send out a very short, very sweet, informative newsletter, kind of keeping you updated on what we feel is important on the planet. Super easy to sign up. You just click the link down below, and I think you're going to love it. Today, I am so excited to welcome in truly one of my heroes, Harvard-trained neuroanatomist, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. Doctor, how are you doing today? May I call you Jill?
Call me Jill. It's good to meet you, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I am so thrilled. Now, if her name sounds familiar to you, it's for good reason. Back in February of 2008, Dr. Jill did the first TED Talk to go viral, and currently it's sitting at, I think, 29 million views on the TED Talks website. It was based on her experience as a neuroanatomist having a stroke and losing the left side of her brain as a result of that stroke. And she wrote the book, My Stroke of Insight, and did the TED Talk. It was just so well received. I watched it over and over and over again. She has a new book, Whole Brain Living. And I have to tell you this, when I read the words, gosh, I'm trying to remember them now. Of course, I'm going to blank on it. That we are connected to the universe, because it was such an emotional attachment to me when I watched your video. It all came tumbling back. So we definitely can touch on the power of emotion in our thinking. So welcome in. I'm really excited. Can you talk to us a little bit about how this book came about? And then let's go ahead and jump into the different characters.
Thank you. So, that TED Talk was back in 2008. And it was the first one to ever go viral. So Ted and I kind of got famous together. And it was a very exciting time in my life. And I was traveling the world and people were recognizing me everywhere I went. It's amazing how, the internet is. And then, but I realized that people had a real reverence for me because of that talk, but that was a miss for me. I wanted people to have a reverence for themselves and for their own lives, because truly, when we have a reverence for ourselves, we live differently. We treat ourselves differently. We engage with the world differently. We honor other people. We have a reverence for life. And so that was the point. The point was missed. And so I literally couldn't figure out, for years, how do I communicate what I experienced in a way that people will actually get it? And I was giving a presentation and I said, I love talking about the brain. It thrills me. People back in the 90s, they weren't so excited about the brain. But now people even understand the language. They know about the amygdala and the hippocampus. But the fact of the matter is we have two amygdala. We have two emotional systems. And there was literally an audible gasp in the room. And I thought, that's it. People understand that we have two different cognitive minds. We have a right hemisphere, we have a left hemisphere, but each hemisphere has its own limbic emotional tissue and it has its own thinking tissue. So we end up with two emotional as well as two thinking modules of cells. And that's why we can experience emotional conflict. So from there, it was like, oh my gosh, that's what's been missing. And that's what whole brain living, the book Whole Brain Living, is about.
Yeah, and that is such a good way of putting it, the emotional conflict. When we've all had that experience of, oh, I think I should do this, but then I'm nagged to do this, or I'm not, I don't know. And
Right.
the brain huddle that you talk about in the book,
Yeah.
I think is such a valuable skill to be able to really dive in and have that time. Let's talk about the different characters right now, how you decided to define them, how you organize them, and then I want to move into the type of thinking that Western civilization celebrates and where we're heavily dominated, and kind of how maybe we can smooth that out a little bit.
Let's smooth that out a little. Let's spread the love inside that brain. So when you look at the brain, you have the way evolution happens and the different species happen is that you have a group of cells, and those cells perform a certain function. So let's say you have a reptile. And a reptile is essentially a vertebrate, which means it has bones, vertebra. And at the top of the spinal cord is cellular tissue that is essentially our brain stem. And so it's kind of like a little brain on top of the spinal cord, and it's got on off switches. I'm hungry, I eat, I'm no longer hungry kind of things. So then new tissue gets added on top of the brainstem region, and that's the emotional or limbic tissue. And everything's bilateral in the organic system, so that we have limbic emotional tissue in the right hemisphere as well as in the left hemisphere. And that makes a mammal. So then we have, for a human, we add new thinking tissue on top of the limbic tissue. So we have thinking and limbic emotion, thinking emotion in each of our hemispheres as human beings. So what we're doing as human beings is we're essentially working the kinks out and streamlining what's going on in the thinking tissue with what's going on below that in each hemisphere, thinking tissue to thinking tissue, because that's all new, and then emotional tissue to emotional tissue. So we end up with these four modules of cells, and each module of cells has a different skill set. And when you package together skill sets created by a module of cells, we live that and experience that as a personality. So say, for example, the left thinking tissue. The left thinking, if you say to a typical scientist, how much of the brain is conscious? They're going to say left thinking rational tissue is our conscious brain. And that's what it does. It's rational. Which means it takes information that I have inside of my head, it relates it to the external world, and it makes a judgment about that. So this is going to be my ability as an individual to first of all, have me an individual. Because me, the individual, my identity, my ego group of cells is in that left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere has me, the individual. It has a group of cells that actually defines the boundaries of where I begin and where I end. How do I know that this nose on my face is of me, but these glasses on my nose are not of me? How do I know that? I know that because there's a group of cells in the left hemisphere that defines what is me. So I end up with this individuation, I, the ego, and then it's how do I relate me to the external world? But the other thing about this left hemisphere is that it has a past and it has a future. And it has that because of the emotional tissue in that left hemisphere. Those cells, it's a miracle. How on earth do a group of cells step out of the present moment experience and come and have a past and compare memory information from past experience to what is currently going on in the present to make the decision if I'm safe or not? I mean, it's a miracle. These cells, I mean, it's like, to me as a neuroanatomist, this is the wildest thing that exists in us as living beings, that we have cells that can step out of the present moment and exist in another time. So we end up.
I just want to jump in here because I had that experience when I watched your TED Talk and you said the words, the life force power of the universe. We are the life force power of the universe. I'm getting goosebumps. It hit me so hard emotionally way back then that when I read the words a decade later, I had that same emotional reaction. And as a result, I understood why.
It's amazing. We are biological miracles that we exist at all. I mean, just wow. And so many of us, we don't even think about ourselves as a biological creature. It's just like me, I have a left brain, I have an identity, I begin and end here. And my life is about, I have an internal world and external world, and it's all about fitting me into the external social norm. And it's like, well, that's great for a left hemisphere, but that's not what's going on in the right hemisphere. So the right hemisphere doesn't have a past and a future. Those cells don't step out of the present moment. So in the right hemisphere, the emotional tissue is right here, right now, having the experience, bringing in data from all my sensory systems at the same time, exploding into a collage of what life is right here, right now. And I'm right here, right now. And I don't remember anything that's not right here, right now, because I'm not in the past and I'm not in the future. I'm just right here, right now. And I don't have a me. I don't have an individuation. I don't have an ego center. I don't have Jill Bolte Taylor. I don't have, this is where I begin and end. So the experience of life to me in the consciousness of our right hemisphere is we are big energy balls. That's all we are to the right hemisphere. So if we all are just big energy balls, I mean, imagine we're not a single-celled organism that is attracted toward and repelled away from. We are 50 trillion molecular geniuses all working together in order for us to have human life. And because of all that complexity, we are attracted toward and we are repelled away from. So we just have these four very distinctive groups of cells that produce four very specific skill sets, resulting in four very specific personalities that at a neuroanatomical level, at the level of our brain, we all have these four characters. And so it's like, okay, well, some of us can readily identify with each of these four modules of cells, while some of us say, oh, I don't have that at all. And I say, you might want to talk to your spouse. I might be able to identify that in you a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, the thing that struck me, and once I started reading the book, I started being very aware of those different parts of my brain and where I was working in. And when you said that you are able to identify where you're thinking from,
Yeah.
at first I was confused about that, but then I started to understand. And once you get it, it becomes really clear and obvious.
Right.
Here's the interesting thing. When you described your experience during the stroke, you were in bliss. You were in pure bliss. You had no beginning and end. It almost sounded like you were in pure consciousness. and that you perceived yourself almost as an orb of light. And we're very aware now in our culture that orbs exist, orbs of light exist. So you lost that individuation and became one with the cosmos, the unified field. I find that so fascinating. What a wonderful place to be. But if you're there all the time, how are you going to put your shoes on?
Exactly. It's a completely non-functional space. I mean, it's a magnificent experience. And so as we look at this brain, I consider it as, yes, we are the life force power of the universe. In the right hemisphere, we literally are as big as the universe. And and the emotional limbic tissue experiences is this marriage between I am the life force power of the universe, and yet I'm a biological creature capable of having an experience. And so the emotional experiential tissue, limbic tissue in the right hemisphere, that's what it's doing. It's playful. It's right here, right now, and it's completely engaged, and whatever it's doing, and it's lost in the flow of time because it doesn't experience time. And so this is a part of us that wants to, go do what we love to do. Well, what do you love to do? We love to do our art. We get lost in our music. We get lost in whatever, wherever, whatever. And some people say, Jill, I can't identify that part of myself. And I say, well, then, ask yourself why. Is another part of yourself saying, well, that's a waste of time and it has no value? And if so, then go and look at that part of your brain, which is going to be the judgment of right and wrong and good and bad, which is going to be in the left hemisphere. So we have these four very different ways of being, and it's ongoing in our head all the time anyway. And what whole brain living does is it helps us differentiate these different parts of who we are so that we can actually bring them into communication with one another and negotiate without conflict. I mean, if all parts of me are making a decision at the same time, then I'm having an internal negotiation. I'm not feeling this conflict about, a part of me wants to do this and I want to do that. And but I need to be on the computer. And now I'm not happy because I really want to be off doing my limestone carving. But, no, I've got to be on the computer because it's on the calendar. And it's like, so I'm not happy. And it's like, no, it's like the negotiation. I will do this, and then I will take quality time and do that without feeling guilty about it.
The issue comes up, particularly for those of us in Western civilization, Western culture. We don't celebrate right brain living. We celebrate punctuality, being productive, showing up on time, being at the meeting, putting the report in, this and that. There is so much weight and emphasis put on that part of our activity, our brain, that I almost feel like the right brain has just been kind of atrophied from the walking in line, doing what you're being told to do emphasis that we have in Western culture.
Right. Right. And when you think about that, the two hemispheres have different values. The left hemisphere values me. I am a group of cells in my left hemisphere. I'm an ego center. And so I exist, and this is where I begin and end. And I want more. And because I'm going to think on a hierarchy and compare myself to who's ahead of me and who's below me. And I want more, and I'm climbing the ladder. And so I always want more, and I always want more. And I want a bigger house, and I want a bigger bank account, and I want bigger toys, and I want more, right? And it's never satisfied. It always wants more, because now, if I achieve, now I'm on a new plane, and now I got to compete with these people, right? And so it's just this constant push, more. And that's the value of the left hemisphere. The problem with that is that's our stress circuitry. And we as biological creatures, we are not like a robot or a computer where you plug us into the wall and we go until the hard drive dies, and then you go get a new one. right? We're not like that. We're a biological system. And as a biological system, we have to push and then pause. We push and we pause. And if we don't allow the pause, we just push, 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 push. The system moves into stress. We don't sleep. It never quiets. We go, 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 go. We're not happy. There's no joy. There's no rest. There's no pause. And the problem is that as human beings, our genius is in the pause. Our genius, our creativity, our innovation, our entrepreneurialism, our new possibilities is in that right hemisphere pause of get my mind out of the do, predictable, what all that left hemisphere is, and allow that to rest and go play a game of basketball. I live in Indiana. Go play a game of basketball, right? Allow yourself to stop thinking about everything. And in that pause, in that relaxation comes new insights, new awareness, new associations to go back then and really fuel the left hemisphere in a positive way. So whole brain living is the ultimate goal of what we are as humanity. I mean, biologically, it's what we're doing. And so it's like, okay, well, how can we take what we understand to be true about the brain and figure out how to not skew ourselves to the value structure of the me and the mine and the more, to the we and the health and well-being of us as biological creatures, as a society in relationship to this beautiful planet, because we're 100% dependent on that symbiotic relationship. And so we end up as a this or that. And what I want us to do is become a this and that.
Mm-hmm. Which is exactly why we can sit for days struggling on a problem, trying to solve it. The minute we walk away and take the dog out, or we're putting around in the garage, putting things away, or just doing something lighthearted, boom, it comes in because we've opened up space for that creative inspiration.
Right. That's exactly right. We pull the energy out of that specific left hemisphere group of cells that's routinizing, but all it knows is what it knows. And so if it doesn't know it, it's never going to know it until you pause and go be open to new things. I mean, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah, but here we're not celebrated in this culture for being airy-fairy and taking off time and just being creative and meditating and this and that. We are so heavily weighted towards practicality that I think we're missing so much in our culture from that right brain living and really being in that creative space. Can you talk about why you think, and you stated in the book that you feel like that right brain is where we connect to the universal field or the consciousness of all that is. Why do you think that is? Is there anatomy that leads you to believe that? Or is that just because that's where the creative spark seems to come in?
Well, as soon as I don't exist, as soon as I'm not the center of the universe and it's not all about me, then what's it about? It's about I'm an energy ball. I mean, really, if we consider I'm either an energy ball and I can be me, an individual, Jill Bolte Taylor, and all the details that revolve around her and her as she relates to the social norm and the external world. So if I exist in my left hemisphere in the absence of me, the individual, my only alternative is to be a big ball of energy without the boundaries, without the labeling, without the language of that left hemisphere. So we're all wired for this. It is what we are. The question is, what gets in the way of us having that experience of feeling connected to all that is? And if you look at the brain and it's just a group of cells, which it is, and these 4 different groups of cells can be identified and differentiated in each one of us, which we can. When we get to know them, we realize what I call character 1 is that left thinking tissue. And I know what she is like. I give her a name. I call her Helen. It's short for Hell on Wheels. She gets it done. She's busy, right? She's the only one that's busy like that. She knows how to have a rational conversation. She knows how to be analytical. She understands what 1 + 1 equals because she understands what a one is. I mean but that's the only part of my brain that is doing that. I know how she holds my body. I know she knows, she's punctual and she runs my calendar and she puts my glasses on my face. So she's a character inside of me. She holds my body differently. She has aches and pains that are actually unique to her because she holds my body in certain ways. The emotional tissue of that left hemisphere, which I call character 2, this is that beautiful, magnificent group of cells that steps out of the present moment and compares, have I ever seen what's going on in the present moment with what I'm experiencing in the present moment, to push it away and say no to it. So this is what I call Abby. I give it a name because it's a little character. And she is all my pain from the past. She's my fear. She's my deep emotion. She's limbic tissue. Information comes in and I have a fight or flight response. And once that autonomic nervous system fires, then I pack on top of that a deep emotion. So I end up with all of these deep emotions about my past and my fears of the future, and they're in that tissue. That's anatomically the bucket they fit in. That's what those cells do. And so in the right hemisphere, I don't have me, the individual, but I have the emotional experience of the present moment. So without me in this experience, now I'm big as the universe. I'm open to possibility. I'm not in the past. I'm not in the future. I'm right here, right now. I'm having an experience, and I'm curious because I'm not confined to the box of right and wrong and good and bad that's in the left hemisphere. So I just explore. So I get to explore. I'm curious. I'm creative. I'm putting new things together. I'm not making judgment. Me, the individual, don't exist. I'm just in the possibility, but I'm having an experience, and that's that emotional tissue. But then the right thinking tissue doesn't even have that experiential. It simply is. It's like this portal of, I'm a big energy ball, big as the universe. Oh my God, I'm alive. Oh my God, I have eyeballs. Oh my God, I have a liver. Oh my God, I have mobility. Oh my God, there's a you. Oh my God, I can communicate with you because I have this brain that gives me language. And it's just like an oh my God experience. And you can call it whatever you want, but it's this consciousness of being connected to all that is. But when I'm connected to all that is, I'm really completely non-functional because I'm not at all related to the value of me and mine. There's no impetus toward. There's simply this awe and this wonder, and it's like this sense of gratitude that I'm alive, and then I'm not alive anymore, and then I'm gone, and then it doesn't matter because, oh my God, I was. And it's like, wow.
Was that what you experienced when you had your stroke?
Yeah, I was just like, oh my God, I'm alive. I didn't die that day. That's all that mattered. Only thing that mattered was I did not die that day. I was so far detached from my left hemisphere because, hemorrhage happened. It blew up the left thinking. It was gone. It blew up the left emotion. It was gone. I had no energy left in my body. I was just drained. So the right emotional tissue was offline, and all I had was this blissful euphoria of the present moment of, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm not dead. Now, I wasn't a complete human at that point, technically, because 3/4 of my brain was completely offline and not working, but I did not die that day. And so I got to make some decisions about, well, do I care? Do I try or do I not try? I mean, that's what life really boiled down to. Do I try or do I not try? And I was 37 at the time of the hemorrhage. I was in good physical condition. I could have been in this, what people would call a vegetative condition, for decades. And it was like, well, I either try or I don't try it. And I thought to myself, when I'm gone from this space, when I am dead, I get to experience this blissful euphoria probably all the time. It's what I become. It's what I dissolve into, this intense big ball of love. The energy felt like love. And it's like, okay, when I'm dead, that's going to be for all eternity, but I'm not dead yet. And if I'm not dead yet, and I can experience this feeling of blissful euphoria, imagine if people knew that they could tap into this part of who they are while they're living. Humanity would shift in how it lives its life and what we create ourselves to be. And it
Yeah.
was, okay, I'm willing to try to recover enough of the skill sets of those different parts of my brain that were now damaged to be able to communicate what the experience was like and how others might be able to find that piece of themselves too.
Yeah. During that process, were you cognitive of wanting to come back to a certain point? And what I mean by that, not letting that left brain take
Yeah.
over.
Yes, my agreement that I mean, I was blissful euphoria, big as the universe. I mean, who doesn't want to stay there?
Who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't want that? And but you cannot be that and be an individual. You can't do that. It's two different groups of cells that perceive everything differently and have different values. And it was like, if I'm going to so my agreement with myself was I will recover enough of those skill sets to be able to communicate what I have experienced from the inside without losing my primary connection as what I had gained. I was not willing to come back 100% to what I had been before. And in order to do that, that meant I, I had to practice. I had to practice both. I had to practice being this and that, and being able to choose in any moment, do I want to be a this or do I want to be that? And when I feel life and possibilities and ego and fame and money and all that, when I feel the pull of all that, it's like, or do I just want to go paddleboard?
Just go
Right.
paddleboard.
And I just go paddleboard. Yeah. And so I set my life up to support my being able to just go paddleboard. So I live on a boat half a year,
In
and
Kentucky, right?
Kentucky, out in beautiful nowhere with my dogs or my family. And I do life as a left brain, but I don't travel. And because I don't travel, it really allows me to be in my blissful euphoria. And then I go do some work. And then I
Yeah.
go to my blissful euphoria and I go do some work. So I'm
Yeah.
really clear what my values are. And I just feel blessed to be alive. And, it's, I think that this book is truly my life work. And fortunately, people like you are finding it of value and sharing it with your audiences and people you care about, and living by its principles and allowing your own brain to shift and better understand itself and who and how you want to be in the world. And then as we, of course, raise that level of vibration, then it becomes more acceptable and by society. And it's a multi-billion-dollar market to try to, how do I get out of that left hemisphere that is routinizing, drive, stress into, oh my gosh, meditation, into yoga, into all kinds of different things in order to help us shift more into that right hemisphere consciousness. And I think it's a whole lot easier than most people think, but nobody had a roadmap on, well, what does it actually mean? What does it feel like? How do I do it? And, so people will spend 20 years in meditation trying to achieve what? A glimpse. Well, what if they actually knew what that group of cells did? And that they knew what was getting in the way of their ability to actually run that tissue. More information helps people do things in a different way.
More
Refined.
efficiently. Yeah. When we look at any human function, use creates a clear connection, more strength, like when you're lifting weights or this and that. In our culture, in Western culture, particularly here in the US, which we're currently both in the US, we celebrate that linear thinking, that critical thinking. That is what gets all the attention. And I think it's to the detriment of that creative brain. My experience is that the cool things in life come from that creative connection. All the good ideas, all the inspiration, all the wonderful feelings, that feeling of joy, belonging, just that floating kind of feeling of being part of all that is. Why do you think that we have been so heavily weighted on the left side of the brain to almost atrophying the right side?
I think our school system somewhere along the line decided that the knowledge base that it was going to teach were going to be skill sets of the left hemisphere. If you look at any school corporation, if you have a budget cut, what's going to get cut? Art, music, physical education. And these are all things that stimulate the right hemisphere. But there's no obvious benefit to me having an art class, or to me having a music class, or me having PE, when instead you could teach me how to figure out my checkbook. So as long as our government system, which is hierarchical, thank goodness, the left hemisphere keeps order in our community, and the school systems have hierarchy. So the left hemisphere really values itself, and it judges itself based on its own performance in comparison to other systems. So if you're going to function with that kind of a system, it's the nature of the system. The beauty of the universe is that order seeks its own higher level of order. And so if that left hemisphere gets turned on without any value of what's going on outside of that system, then it's just going to continue to create more order. But in a system that actually embraces the this and the that, it's going to create more of an equal system. And that's another way of being in the universe. But in the right hemisphere has a tendency to organize things as that collective whole. The left hemisphere, which is really values the more masculine, if you will, traits of who we are as a society. And unfortunately, a big part of that is this pain from the past that never gets heard, never gets explored, never gets healed, and it comes out looking like violence. And so now we're existing in a very violent society because the right hemisphere people don't understand that the peace and euphoria and the comfort, the natural nurturing of self. I mean, just think about it. We are designed biologically for self-nurture. And it's like, but we don't do that as a society. We reach outside of ourselves for more, or for nurturance. And in many pieces of the culture, that's viewed as weakness. And it's like, to the linear system, yeah, it does define it as such. But then you have to look at the consequences of the absence of that, and that is violence.
Yeah, and which is right where we are now. If you were in charge of the educational system in the US, what changes would you implement?
Well, right now, it's interesting that you asked that, because we have a grant into the federal government for bringing whole brain living to the schools. But we're not bringing it to the children. We're bringing it to the adults. And the adults is the administrators and the teachers, as well as the parents. So if we can help the adult population gain value for all four parts of our brain, and the ability to communicate through the tool of the brain huddle, where they're all actually available, I know all parts of me, I'm making decisions based on the whole, then our children will be reared inside of a different culture. So that's how whole brain living is strategizing how to kind of find a fundamental. And the beauty of working with schools is that parents are everybody. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're waitresses, they're attorneys, they're everybody. So it's the general public. because all the children are inside of the system. So instead of going, because we could create programming for this and that and the other and the other and the other, or we can hit the parents. And by hitting the parents, we're gaining access to all these different things. But some of my colleagues are in the next couple of weeks bringing whole brain living into a prison system in Colorado and exposing the prison. Now imagine being in a prison. I cannot, but if I were to imagine that, imagine if we had a group of criminals of I don't know what we call them, prisoners in our prison system who were becoming more conscious, not just to what they've done, but to how they are and to the power of what they are and how to self-soothe their own fear base. Because I couldn't imagine being inside of four walls and locked up and not having alarm, alarm, alert, alert all the time. So how do I manage that piece of my life, not be completely paralyzed and still utilize myself and grow as a human being? Well, this is reform, right? This is social justice. This is why possibility exists, but we don't have that going on inside of our jails because of the alarm, alarm, alert, alert. If we can't get past alarm, alarm, alert, alert, where we erupt with violence to push away from the fear or the anxiety or the whatever, then we can't change the person. We can't help them evolve into more of who they are other than that potential of violence.
Yeah, it's a sad direction that we're going in, and definitely bringing on the whole human is going to lead us in a place that we can become the kind of civilization we'd like to be. Can you talk about the brain huddle and why it's important and how it can help those who are very heavily weighted towards left brain thinking to kind of even things out and become an even broader, more creative, more inspired individual?
Well, I look at whole brain living and the four different characters inside of the brain like the hand. Let's say I'm a newborn and I'm born into the world and I'm just an energy ball. And as an energy ball, infants are flailing around. And they need to flail around because every movement of the flail is information to the brain. So I am not a fan for swaddling babies down all the time. I'm just not. To me, this is important information that the brain is getting. So then all of a sudden, let's say, I'm flopping my little hand, I'm in my crib, and I'm realizing I'm doing that. I'm connected. I'm doing that. That's mine. That's me. Right? And there's a thing, right? I have now differentiated that I have a thing. I have a hand. And I can push with it, and I can pull with it, and I can swat with it, and I can whack with it, and I can, I can do things with it now. Oh my gosh, it's a thing. But imagine the new level of dexterity that I get when I actually can differentiate the fingers of that hand. Now, all of a sudden, I have erupted to a whole new level of possibility, right? Because now I can differentiate. And that's the same thing about the brain. We're all flopping around with a brain, and we know, okay, that's conscious, this is emotions, this is thinking, this is unconscious, this is what we're existing in a society where we only take responsibility for 1/4 of what's going on inside of our heads. 1/4. Well, imagine if you actually understood all four parts of the brain and you could become responsible for your whole brain, all of you. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Do I want to feel that? How do I distract myself away from that? Because that's not healthy for me. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden I can take responsibility for my own health and well-being. So how do I do that? Well, let's say there's somebody in my life who, they just harm my emotional trigger, and I'm going to say it. My brother, diagnosed with schizophrenia, that boy, he and I have been oil and water our whole lives. We do not mix, but we live, we get each other, we're going to get each other until one of us isn't here anymore. So we're in each other's lives. And I look at him, and whether, he has an interesting brain. So I love having a relationship with him because he's kind of predictably unpredictable. And I find that interesting. So, but he can poke at me better than anybody can. And I can either engage and let all that old circuitry of poking, from when we were children, and I can get upset with him, and I can, or I can just kind of watch him from a different part of my brain and just watch him poking. Right. And it's like, he's poking. Here we go. Here's a poke. There's a poke. And then he tries another strategy, because this is the dance that we do with one another as human beings. But the fact of the matter is, if there's 4 of me and there's 4 of him, there's 8 of us in any relationship. Okay, well, that just got a little more complex. But isn't it nice to know that when I'm in my character 1 rational thinking, or I'm in my playful right here, right now, or I'm in my more prayerful celebration state of gratitude, that my brother has no power over poking me, because it's not available. I don't make it available to him. And that's my power. Now, if I get tired, if I don't get a good night's sleep for a few days, I become more vulnerable, because I don't have access to all of the parts of my brain so clearly. So when I know the different parts of who I am, and I have them in conversation with one another, I pick and choose who and how I want to be in any moment. And that is personal freedom.
Oh, it's so well put. And using your brother was brilliant. I loved that.
I love him.
Reading the book has been so eye-opening for me, and it kind of outlined a process that I had already gone through, but it gave me terms. It gave me places to put the information. I have not named my 4 characters yet. I'm still mulling it over, but I know character 1 is going to start with an A, because that was my A-type personality. And that's where I used to live. My feet hit the floor in the morning. I was going to be productive. I was going to win. I was going to figure it out. I was going to do it better. I was going to achieve. I was going to figure out how to make more money, blah, 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 blah. What a miserable way to live.
Yeah. Push,
Absolutely.
push. No satisfaction. There's no
None.
satisfaction.
There's none, and
Yeah.
it never, ever stops. What I have learned as an older person, and I think it's, for some of us, it's just time under pressure, that I no longer live there. That's where I go think about things like, well, it's probably better if I put my socks on first and then my shoes.
Exactly.
I make decisions, just kind of management decisions from that place, where I find the way that my life works in an absolutely magical, inspired way is if I'm in that creative center. That's where the best ideas come from. That's where the best solutions come from. And I no longer make decisions based on, oh, get a piece of paper and write pros and cons. I don't do that anymore. That does not work for me. What works for me is to imagine different scenarios, and then I follow the one that I get the most excited about.
Good.
I get a little tingly.
Really?
All of a sudden I'm having possibilities come in my mind.
Right.
Why? And I get goosebumps just talking about it. Why do we have that emotional reaction when we're living in that area of creative possibilities?
Well, you're having an emotion in the other too. You're just picking one over the other.
It doesn't feel good.
That's right. But it's still that emotional tissue.
You're right. You're right.
A conversation between your 2 emotional systems. And you're saying, and I do it all the time. If I'm tempted by something, I put myself there and I say, okay, Jill, act like you made that decision. How does it feel? And it either feels life-giving or life-sucking. And if it feels life-giving, I say yes to it. And otherwise, I go to the other decision and say, how does that feel? And it's like, yeah, I'd rather go paddleboard.
Yeah.
Really. And listening. I mean, what you're doing is you're finally listening to the different parts of who you are. And so that's the point. Now, by knowing these different parts, I always find it interesting. It's strong character 1s, usually hard character 1s, who refuse to name their 4 characters because of the perfectionist. Oh, I can't give it a name because it won't be the perfect name. And I say, give it a name, call it A. and then after a while, you're going to say, oh yeah, her name is really this. And then who cares? It's yours. Nobody cares unless
That's
you
such a
book about it.
that's such a good point. So
Yeah.
what if our connection to the universal truth, to the universal information, and I want to talk about this concept, and you've seen it, I know, because of your scientific background. There will be people from different places around the planet that come up with a brilliant new concept or idea or solution simultaneously, not having discussed it with each other. And we've seen that in inventions, we've seen that in scientific breakthroughs, we've seen it in medical breakthroughs. Why do you think that is? Is there a universal knowledge base that we're able to tap into? What's that about for you?
So I think you ought to think about the language that you use, because you use language that most left hemispheres, extreme left hemispheres, are not comfortable with. Universal, ooh, woo woo. Magical, ooh, woo woo, right? I don't use that language. I use the language of the brain. And I use the language of the brain because I know that extreme left hemisphere character one profiles, your A, my Helen, they're kind of find an aversion to that language. So I'm very careful in what language I use and how I experience it, because the woo-woo factor is a real thing. But the factor is, we're essentially wired for woo-woo, but we're not wired for the language we use around it. Right. So I think one, being conscious of the language that one uses when describing this experience of feeling connected to all that is. I mean, connected to all that is and being an energy ball is a form of woo-woo, but it doesn't tend, it's still scientifically based, and the left hemisphere is okay with that scientifically based. So to answer your question, though, the way the science learns new information and has new fields and grows is it starts with a whole bunch of people are excited about, let's say, the new concept of quantum physics, right? What is quantum physics? And so then you got people here and people there and people over there on the planet, and everybody's kind of doing their own little thing, and it's really considered woo-woo, right? And it's woo-woo because we have no clue from a left hemisphere scientific perspective about how it works. Well, the left hemisphere is linear. It knows this, and then it knows this, and then it knows this, and then it knows this, and they package all together, and it makes sense because they can tell a story about it. Well, that's very different from, okay, some dude did an experiment where they were messing with molecules on one side of the planet, and then on the other side of the planet, they could measure the shift happening at the same time. And all of a sudden, the left hemisphere is going, well, what about my step, then step, then step, then step? And I can't linear that concept together. So it's not real and it didn't really happen. It was just circumstance, right? I mean, this is the way the left hemisphere organizes information versus the way the right hemisphere knows everything as a collective whole. And so what happens over here, of course, influences what's over there, just like you throw a rock in a middle of a lake and eventually that little ripple is going to boop, go up against the shore all around the pond. So there's just two completely different ways of thinking about it. But so it's like a pyramid. We got enough people randomly doing experimentation, and then they learn something. And then it's like, okay, so then we go a little bit higher because now we've got all this information, and it's like, and they know something. And then we go a little bit higher and we become more and more focused on what we understand. We are differentiating information about the big picture based on the way the left hemisphere can actually manage and feel safe inside of that information. Otherwise, it just dismisses it. I mean, the left hemisphere dismisses everything it doesn't understand, and it puts itself as superior to that which it doesn't understand as inferior. And the right hemisphere is just looking at the left hemisphere going, seriously? Are you really that ignorant? I mean, it's like, come on, let's have a conversation.
This is so
Together, but no, societies of this or of that, not of this and of that.
That is so true. I have a girlfriend, Jill, who was a computer science major. We're really good friends. We really enjoy each other. If I start talking about woo-woo stuff, she's just like wants to scream and run out of the room. She
Can't
cannot
do it.
stand it.
Cannot stand it. Now, if you start talking about it in scientific terminology and you paint her a picture that she can linearly understand, she's a computer scientist, for God's sake. I mean, who else is like this is absolute, and then this is absolute, and then it's a this or a that, and then it's a this or a that, and then a this. I mean, talk about building by Legos, which is brilliant in her ability to do that, but it can't go from here to up there. There's no leap, and it just leaves. It's a cringe. I mean, the whole soul just cringes and pushes it away, and it's like, what are you afraid of?
Oh gosh, that was so perfectly put. What do you feel like is the potential for Western civilization? I'm really picking on the West right now because I do think there are other cultures, indigenous cultures, that are probably a little bit more balanced between the left and the right side of the brain. What do you see as the potential for Western civilization or humanity if we were to balance things out, and in other words, stop focusing on just that left side and bring the right side in for equal time?
Well, I think that there are cultures that are very peaceful. And I think that we would stem from a state of peace, and we would explore as humanity in relation to how do we create a healthy relationship with one another, within ourselves, with one another, and then with the planet. And then we grow humanity to the next level. And we already kind of have, but we've done it in an unhealthy way because we're not healthy yet. And our unhealthiness has now created the internet. And the internet is an electrical conscious, not unconscious, but essentially consciousness that now we can all tap into. But we've taken the insanity of our own conflict and placed that as the insanity of this system, and now we're using it to hurt ourselves as much as to help ourselves. So we're an experiment. We are an unplanned evolution, and we make it or we don't make it. And that's part of what we are. We have bombs placed around the planet where half a dozen people who are extremely left hemisphere dominant are in control, and they decide it's not what they want, and they're going to wipe you out because it's a this and a that. It's a this or a that and it's about me. And it's like, oh, please. But that's what
Yeah.
we are. So can we swell enough from the bottom up in order to change how we vote? And we're really at a critical point in the history of all humanity, I truly believe, right now, in what the future of America is going to be. But again, it's we've been around a little over 200 years, and this is an experiment. This is not the way that left brain driven me, mine dictatorship has been going on. You look at the history of humanity, and we're an interesting creature. And so we either figure it out now or we don't. And then, that was that. So
Yeah.
celebrate what you have.
Yeah. I vote that we figure it out.
Well, I think many of us are figuring it out.
Yeah. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, this has been such a dream for me. Thank you so much. Get the book. The book is really good. It will really clarify our potential as humans.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And if you haven't seen the TED Talk, I'm going to list it down below. 29 million views now just on the TED website, another 10 million, I think, on YouTube. It's absolutely stunning. It will hit you in the emotional center of your right brain. So make sure that you catch it. How can we find out more about you?
I'm at drjilltaylor.com. I'm pretty easy. Everything is shifting for me. As soon as this funding comes in, new website, coursework, new everything. And it's like, I'm doing my piece as best as I can to help us create a more sane world, one brain at a time.
Yeah, and boy, I wish you all the best in that. We really need your work. And I bet right now you want to go paddleboarding.
I do. I want to go paddleboard.
Yeah, I'll let you go to do that. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye now.
Thank you, Kimberly.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.